Rain lashes the night, a curtain of shadows veiling the city. Emily Harper, a dreamer with a fire in her soul, grips the wheel of her Ford Escape, her heart heavy with rejection. "Keep going," she whispers, her grandmother's words a lifeline. Then a scream pierces the darkness. In a grimy alley, a stranger fights for his life, a brick raised to crush his skull. "Stop!" Emily's voice thunders, her courage a beacon. One act, one moment. Will it spark a love that defies all odds? What secrets hide in the stranger's past? Stay with us to unravel shadows and light, a tale of bravery and destiny. Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest stories and drop a comment. Where are you listening from? Will Emily's choice change everything? Don't miss a single word. Rain lashes the night, a curtain of shadows veiling the city. Emily Harper, a dreamer with a fire in her soul, grips the wheel of her Ford Escape, her heart heavy with rejection. "Keep going," she whispers, her grandmother's words a lifeline. The acorn pierces the darkness. In a grimy alley, a stranger fights for his life, a brick raised to crush his skull. "Stop!" Emily's voice thunders, her courage a beacon. One act, one moment. Will it spark a love that defies all odds? What secrets hide in the stranger's past? Stay with us to unravel shadows and light, a tale of bravery and destiny. Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest stories and drop a comment. Where are you listening from? Will Emily's choice change everything? Don't miss a single word. The air in Emily Harper's cramped Brooklyn apartment was thick with the scent of coffee and ink, a testament to the late nights she spent hunched over her laptop, pouring her soul into shadows and light. At 28, Emily, a black woman with a radiant smile that belied her weariness, carried a dream as vast as the city skyline, to become a celebrated novelist. Her manuscript, a tapestry of raw prose weaving tales of racial injustice and the unyielding spirit of black communities, was her heart on paper. But the world of New York publishing had other plans, ones that didn't include a woman like her. Each morning, Emily faced a growing pile of rejection letters on her kitchen table, their crisp white envelopes a stark contrast to the scratched wood beneath. "Dear Ms. Harper," they began, their polite words masking a cold dismissal. "Your work, while passionate, lacks commercial appeal. Or worse, the subject matter is too niche for our audience." Niche. The word stung like a slap, reducing her stories of police brutality, redlining, and intergenerational resilience to a footnote in someone else's narrative. Emily's fingers traced the edges of the latest letter, her dark eyes narrowing. She wasn't naive. She knew niche was code for too black. A judgment passed before her words even had a chance. Yet every rejection fueled the fire in her chest, the one her grandmother had stoked with stories of perseverance. "Keep going, baby. The world ain't ready for you, but you make it ready." On a sweltering July afternoon, Emily boarded the subway to Manhattan, clutching her manuscript in a worn messenger bag. The train rattled through the city's veins, carrying her toward Pinnacle Press, a towering glass fortress in Midtown where literary dreams were made or broken. She'd secured a rare meeting with Richard Grayson, a publishing titan whose name adorned bestseller lists like a royal seal. Emily smoothed her navy blazer, a thrift store find she'd paired with her best slacks, hoping it masked the nerves jittering beneath her skin. This was her shot, the moment she'd rehearsed in her mirror 100 times, reciting her pitch until it was as sharp as her prose. The elevator to the 42nd floor felt like a cage, its mirrored walls reflecting her determined expression at her. When she stepped into Grayson's office, the air shifted, heavy with the scent of leather and old money. Grayson, a silver-haired man in a tailored suit, sat behind a mahogany desk, his eyes flicking over her with a scrutiny that made her stomach twist. "Miss Harper, I presume," he said, his voice smooth, but edged with condescension. "Have a seat." Emily sat, her hands steady as she slid her manuscript across the desk. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Grayson," she began, her voice clear despite the pulse hammering in her ears. "Shadows and Light is a novel about the Black experience in America. Grit, hope, and the fight for justice. It's a story that needs to be told, and I believe Pinnacle's reach could—" Grayson cut her off with a raised hand, his lips curling into a smirk. He flipped through her manuscript, pages rustling like dry leaves, barely glancing at the words she'd bled for. "Miss Harper," he said, his tone dripping with disdain, "what are you doing here? What makes a girl like you think she can be a serious writer?" He paused, his eyes locking onto hers, cold and unyielding. "This," he lifted the manuscript, holding it like a soiled rag, "is a misunderstanding. You think this rubbish belongs on our shelves?" Emily's breath caught, her chest tightening as if the room had shrunk. Before she could respond, Grayson stood, his chair scraping against the polished floor. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed the manuscript at her. Pages scattered across her lap, some fluttering to the floor, the sound like a flock of startled birds. One sheet grazed her cheek, a paper cut stinging her skin. "This is trash," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Take it and go." The room spun. Emily's face burned, not from the cut, but from the weight of his words, the naked prejudice in his gaze. She wanted to scream, to hurl his words back at him, but her grandmother's voice echoed, "Don't let them break you, baby." She knelt, gathering the pages with trembling hands, each one a piece of her heart. She pressed them to her chest, stood, and met Grayson's eyes. "Thank you for your time," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the storm inside her. She turned and walked out, the click of her heels echoing in the silent office. A promise to herself. He's wrong, and I'll prove it. Back in Brooklyn, the sting of Grayson's rejection lingered like a bruise. Emily's apartment, with its peeling paint and thrift store furniture, felt smaller than ever. She spread the manuscript on her table, smoothing out the creased pages, her fingers tracing the words she'd written through countless sleepless nights. The rejection wasn't new. She'd faced it at literary conferences across the city, where organizers overlooked her for panels, choosing authors with polished headshots and universal stories. At a Midtown networking event, an editor had skimmed her sample pages and said, "Readers want escapism, not struggle." Emily had smiled politely, but the subtext was clear. Her blackness, her truth, was too much for their delicate sensibilities. She'd seen it in the sidelong glances at book fairs, the way her pitches were dismissed before she finished her sentence. "Your work's too raw," one editor had said, her eyes barely meeting Emily's. Raw. Another word for unacceptable, for stories that dared to speak of pain and power in a world that preferred silence. Emily knew they weren't just rejecting her manuscript, they were rejecting her skin, her voice. But she'd grown up in Bed-Stuy, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Quitting wasn't in her blood. As evening fell, Emily prepared for a book expo in Queens, one last chance to pitch Shadows and Light before the day's wounds could fester. She slipped into a simple black dress, her armor against the world's judgment, and packed her manuscript, its pages now neatly rebound. The expo was a long shot, small presses, indie authors, and a crowd too busy to notice her, but she had to try. Her mother's words rang in her ears. "You're stronger than their nose, Emily." She grabbed her keys, stepped into the humid night, and climbed into her Ford Escape, the engine sputtering to life. The road to Queens stretched ahead, a ribbon of asphalt under a sky heavy with clouds. Emily didn't know that this night, this drive, would lead her to a moment that would change everything. For now, she was a writer with a dream, bruised but unbroken, carrying her story into a world that wasn't ready for her. But she would make it so. The rain lashed down in relentless sheets, turning the Brooklyn streets into rivers of ink. Emily Harper gripped the steering wheel of her Ford Escape, her knuckles taut against the worn leather. The night was a blur of exhaustion and bruised pride, the sting of another failed book expo in Queens still raw. Her manuscript, Shadows and Light, sat on the passenger seat, its pages creased from a day of being offered and ignored. The city's pulse thrummed through the windshield, a symphony of honks and neon. But Emily's mind was elsewhere, replaying the dismissals, the polite smiles that hid deeper judgments. She was a black woman daring to dream in a world that seemed to have no room for her stories, or her. As she navigated a quiet stretch of road, the rain's rhythm was shattered by a guttural shout, raw and desperate, slicing through the night. Emily's heart lurched. She slowed the SUV, her eyes scanning the shadows. To her left, a narrow alley gaped like a wound, its walls slick with graffiti and water. Another cry, pained, pleading, echoed from within. Against the voice in her head screaming to keep driving, Emily eased the Ford Escape to the curb, her breath shallow. Her grandmother's words, a lodestar in moments of doubt, surfaced. One small act can change a life, baby. She killed the engine, the rain's patter now a roar against the roof. Grabbing her phone and a scarf from her bag, Emily stepped into the deluge, her sneakers soaking through instantly. The alley loomed, its darkness swallowing the streetlight's feeble glow. As she crept closer, the sounds sharpened. Grunts, curses, the sickening thud of fists on flesh. Her pulse hammered, but she pressed forward, peering around the corner. In the alley's dim heart, three men circled, a lone figure slumped against a brick wall. The victim, a man in a rain-soaked blazer, was on his knees, blood streaming from his nose and brow, staining the pavement crimson. One of the attackers, a hulking figure in a hoodie, clutched a fistful of the man's collar, snarling, "You think you can scam us and walk away, you piece of trash?" The man gasped, his voice ragged. "I'm not him. Please, you've got the wrong guy." But his plea was drowned by a second attacker's laugh, cold and cruel. The third man, wiry and twitchy, stepped forward, a jagged brick in his hand. He raised it high, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Let's see you talk your way out of this," he hissed, the brick poised to crush the man's skull. Time seemed to crawl, the rain freezing in midair. Emily's breath caught, her body acting before her mind could catch up. She surged into the alley, her voice erupting like thunder. "Stop it! I'm calling the police!" The attacker spun, startled by the sudden intrusion. Emily stood at the alley's mouth, her silhouette outlined by a passing car's headlights. She held her phone high, its screen shaking in her trembling hand, as if recording their every move. "I'm filming you," she shouted, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "The cops are on their way. Drop the brick now." She dialed 911, her thumb hitting the call button, and spoke into the phone, loud enough for them to hear. "There's an assault in an alley off Flatbush near Avenue D. 3 men attacking someone. One's got a brick, about to kill him." The man with the brick hesitated, the weapon still raised, his eyes darting between Emily and his prey. The leader in the hoodie cursed, shoving the bleeding man to the ground. "She's bluffing," he growled, but his voice wavered. Emily took a step forward, her scarf clutched in her other hand, her gaze locked on the brick wielder. "You want your face all over the internet?" she challenged, her voice cutting through the rain. "Drop it, or I'll make sure everyone knows who you are." The wiry man faltered, the brick slipping from his fingers to land with a dull splash in a puddle. "Let's go!" the leader barked, and the trio bolted, their footsteps echoing as they vanished into the night's embrace. Emily exhaled, her knees threatening to buckle, but she rushed to the fallen man, dropping to the wet pavement beside him. "Hey, you're okay now," she said, her voice softening. "Help's coming." The man groaned, his head lolling against the wall. Blood matted his dark hair, trickling down his pale face, but his eyes flickered open, hazy with pain. "Thank you," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Emily pressed her scarf to his forehead, the fabric soaking red as she tried to staunch the bleeding. "Stay with me," she urged, glancing toward the alley's entrance, praying for the wail of sirens. His hand brushed hers, weak but grateful, and she squeezed it gently. "I've got you." Red and blue lights flashed at the alley's mouth, the screech of tires cutting through the rain. Paramedics swarmed in, their voices clipped and urgent as they assessed the man's injuries. Emily stepped back, her hands slick with water and blood, giving a shaky statement to a police officer. "3 guys. One had a brick," she said, her voice steady now, recounting their descriptions. Hoodie, wiry frame, the glint of a chain on the leader's neck. The officer nodded, jotting notes as the paramedics loaded the man onto a stretcher. "Is he going to be okay?" Emily asked, her eyes fixed on the stretcher as it rolled toward the ambulance. The paramedic, a woman with kind eyes, nodded. "Thanks to you, he's got a chance. Head wounds bleed a lot, but you got help fast." Emily watched as the ambulance doors slammed shut, its lights fading into the rain-soaked night. She didn't know the man's name, didn't know why those men had targeted him, but the weight of what she'd done settled over her like a mantle. She'd faced danger, stared down a brick raised to kill, and saved a life. Back in her Ford Escape, Emily sat in the driver's seat, her clothes clinging to her skin, the scarf now a bloodied rag in her lap. Her hands trembled as she gripped the wheel, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The expo, the rejections, Grayson's sneering face, they felt distant now, overshadowed by the raw reality of the alley. She'd acted when others might have driven by, her grandmother's wisdom guiding her like a beacon. One small act can change a life. She started the engine, the SUV rumbling to life, and drove home through the storm, unaware that her courage had set a chain of events in motion, one that would bind her fate to the stranger she'd saved. The morning sun filtered through the smudged windows of Emily Harper's apartment, casting pale stripes across the kitchen table where her manuscript lay, its pages still bearing the creases of her last rejection. The memory of the previous night, the rain-soaked alley, the glint of a brick raised to kill, the blood on her hands, clung to her like a shadow. She hadn't slept, her mind replaying the moment she'd shouted down those attackers, her voice slicing through their violence. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a quiet tremor in her bones, but also a flicker of pride. She'd saved a man's life, a stranger whose face she could still see, bloodied, broken, but alive because of her. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. An unknown number flashed on the screen, and she hesitated, her thumb hovering. Telemarketers didn't call at 8 a.m., she answered, her voice cautious. Hello? Emily Harper? The voice was warm, tinged with a roughness that spoke of recent pain. This is Ryan Matthews. You saved my life last night. Emily's breath caught, the stranger's face snapping into focus, those pained eyes, the blood matting his hair. You're okay? She asked, her words spilling out before she could stop them. I mean, you're out of the hospital already. Not quite, he said, a faint chuckle breaking through. I'm still at NYU Langone, but I'm stable. Thanks to you. I'd like to thank you in person if you're up for it. Coffee, maybe? My treat. Emily's instinct was to brush it off. Anyone would have done what she did. But something in his voice, a sincerity that cut through her exhaustion, made her pause. Sure, she said, surprising herself. When? Tomorrow, if you're free. There's a place in Park Slope, a cozy spot with great coffee. Noon? She agreed, jotting down the address, her heart giving a curious lurch. As she hung up, she wondered what kind of man drove a Tesla Model S and got mistaken for a con artist. The thought lingered as she sipped her coffee, the bitterness grounding her. She wasn't sure what to expect, but the call felt like a lifeline, a small crack in the wall of rejections and doubts that had defined her week. The next day, Emily stepped into the coffee shop, her messenger bag slung over her shoulder, the weight of shadows and light a constant companion. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted beans and cinnamon, the hum of conversation wrapping around her like a warm blanket. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on a man in a corner booth, his face bruised but unmistakable. He wore a clean button-down, his dark hair neatly combed despite the stitches above his brow. He stood as she approached, his smile tentative but genuine, his blue eyes carrying a vulnerability that mirrored her own. Emily, he said, extending a hand, his grip firm but careful, as if testing his strength. I'm Ryan. I owe you everything. She waved off the gratitude, settling into the booth. I just did what anyone would have done, she said, her voice softer than she intended. The barista set down 2 steaming lattes. The foam swirled into delicate hearts, and Emily wrapped her hands around the mug, letting its warmth steady her. Ryan leaned forward, his expression earnest. Not everyone would have run into an alley to face 3 guys, one with a brick aimed at my head. You didn't hesitate. That's not nothing. Emily's cheeks warmed, the memory of that moment flashing vivid, the brick's jagged edge, the attacker's snarl, her voice roaring through the rain. I couldn't just walk away, she said, her eyes meeting his. My grandmother always said one small act can change a life. I guess I believed her. Ryan's gaze softened, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. She sounds wise. Tell me about you, Emily. What brought you to that alley last night? The question caught her off guard, peeling back layers she'd kept guarded. She hesitated, then let the words spill. raw and unfiltered. "I'm a writer," she began, her voice steady but laced with the weight of countless rejections. "I've got this novel, Shadows and Light, about the Black experience. Struggle, hope, all of it. But the publishing world, it's a wall I keep slamming into." She told him about the editors who dismissed her work as too niche, the conference organizers who overlooked her for panels, and the worst moment of all, Richard Grayson, the publishing titan who'd thrown her manuscript in her face, its pages scattering like her dreams. "He called it trash," she said, her voice catching, the sting still fresh. "Told me I was a misunderstanding, like I didn't belong in his office." Ryan's jaw tightened, his bruises seeming to darken with his anger. "That's not just rejection," he said, his voice low. "That's cruelty. Your story sounds like something the world needs, not something to be tossed aside." Emily shrugged, sipping her latte to hide the lump in her throat. "Maybe, but it's hard to keep believing that when every door slams shut." Ryan leaned back, studying her, with an intensity that made her shift in her seat. "I work in publishing," he said, his tone careful. "I run a small press, Horizon Books. We focus on stories that don't always get heard. Can I read your manuscript? No promises, but I'd like to see what you've got." Emily's heart skipped, a mix of hope and skepticism swirling inside her. She'd heard offers like this before, polite gestures that led nowhere. But Ryan's eyes held no pity, only a quiet conviction that felt different. "Why would you want to?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because you saved my life," he said simply, "and because I think someone who faces down a guy with a brick has a story worth telling." The words landed like a spark, igniting something Emily hadn't felt in months. Possibility. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her bag where the manuscript rested. "Okay," she said finally, pulling out her phone. "I'll email it to you tonight, but don't expect a fairy tale." Ryan smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes despite the stitches on his brow. "I don't need a fairy tale. I just want the truth." They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing effortlessly. Emily found herself laughing at Ryan's dry humor, the way he described his battles with the publishing industry's gatekeepers. He didn't push her for more than she was ready to give, and she didn't ask about the attack, sensing the wound was still too fresh. When they parted, Ryan insisted on paying for the coffee, his hand brushing hers as he handed her a business card. "Send me that manuscript," he said, his voice firm but kind. "I mean it." Emily walked back to her Ford Escape, the card tucked in her pocket, its edges sharp against her fingers. The weight of the night before, the fear, the blood, the brick still lingered, but so did the warmth of Ryan's words, his belief in her when she'd almost stopped believing in herself. That night she sat at her laptop, the manuscript open before her. She attached it to an email, her cursor hovering over the send button. Her grandmother's voice echoed, "One small act, baby." She'd saved Ryan's life in that alley. Maybe, just maybe, he could help save her dream. As she hit send, the email whisking shadows and light into the unknown, Emily felt a shift, subtle but undeniable. The coffee shop meeting, the stranger she'd saved, the spark of connection. It was a thread, fragile but real, pulling her towards something new. She didn't know what would come of it, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like her story wasn't over. The glow of Emily Harper's laptop screen cast stark shadows across her apartment's walls. Each word of Shadows and Light a battle won against doubt. Months had passed since that rain-soaked night when she'd saved a stranger's life, since the coffee shop where Ryan Matthews had seen something in her words that others had dismissed. Now their partnership was a lifeline, pulling her manuscript from obscurity toward a world that might finally listen. But the path to publication was a tightrope, and Emily walked it with a heart pounding from hope and fear in equal measure. Ryan's office at Horizon Books became a crucible for Emily's dreams. They pored over her manuscript, his pen marking passages with a precision that sharpened her prose without dulling its edge. "This scene here," he'd say, tapping a page, "it's raw, but it needs rhythm to hit harder." Emily, initially guarded, learned to trust his instinct, her voice growing bolder with each revision. Ryan wasn't just an editor, He was a bridge, connecting her to a network of industry titans who'd once slammed their doors in her face. He pitched shadows and light with a fervor that matched her own, his voice carrying her story into the sleek offices of Knopf and Penguin, where editors listened, their skepticism giving way to intrigue. The breakthrough came on a crisp October evening when Emily's phone buzzed with Ryan's name. "HarperCollins wants it," he said, his voice electric. "6 figures, Emily. They're all in." She sank to her apartment floor, the contract in her trembling hands, tears blurring the legal jargon. 6 figures. Numbers that meant rent paid, debts cleared, a chance to breathe. But more than that, it meant her story, her blackness, her truth, would reach shelves, hearts, minds. She clutched the contract like a talisman, whispering, "We did it," to the empty room, to her grandmother's memory, to the girl who'd picked up her scattered manuscript after Richard Grayson's cruelty. When Shadows and Light launched in spring 2026, it detonated like a quiet bomb, its impact rippling far beyond Emily's wildest hopes. The New York Times called it a searing, vital debut, its review a badge of triumph. Oprah's book club anointed it, and bookstores couldn't keep it stocked. Women, especially black women, flooded social media with dog-eared copies, their posts a chorus of recognition. "This is us." Emily's inbox overflowed with speaking invitations, her name now a beacon for those who'd been silenced. She stood taller, her voice no longer trembling when she pitched herself, but the weight of prejudice still shadowed her path. At a literary festival in Chicago, the air thick with anticipation, Emily took the stage for a panel on new voices. The crowd was a sea of eager faces, but one panelist, a white man with a smug grin, turned the discussion sour. "You're just capitalizing on black pain for clout, aren't you?" he said, his voice loud enough to draw gasps. The room stilled, eyes swiveling to Emily. Her pulse raced, the echo of Grayson's thrown manuscript ringing in her ears. She could shrink, deflect, or play nice. But she was done with that. Emily leaned into the microphone, her gaze steady, her voice a blade wrapped in velvet. "I write to heal, to reveal, to remind us we're human," she said. "If that's too much for you, that's your burden, not mine." The crowd erupted, applause thundering through the hall, the moment captured on phones and shared across the internet. That night, Emily's words went viral, a rallying cry for those who'd been told their stories didn't matter. She left the stage trembling, not with fear but with power. Her place in the world was carved a little deeper. Back in her hotel room, Emily scrolled through the flood of messages, readers thanking her, writers inspired by her, a few trolls spewing venom she'd learned to ignore. Ryan called, his voice warm with pride. "You were incredible," he said. "You're changing things, Emily." She smiled, the phone pressed to her ear, feeling the truth of it. Shadows and Light wasn't just a book. It was a movement, a mirror, a door kicked open. And yet, as she hung up, she knew the fight wasn't over. The industry's gatekeepers still watched, waiting for her to falter. But Emily Harper, bruised but unbroken, was ready to keep writing, keep proving them wrong. The flicker of a desk lamp cast a warm glow over the cluttered office, where Emily Harper and Ryan Matthews sat hunched over a stack of revised pages, the air thick with the scent of takeout shrimp and ink. Shadows and Light had soared, its success a wildfire that lit up Emily's world. But the work didn't stop. Late nights like this, fueled by spicy food from a local joint and Ryan's relentless drive, had become their rhythm. Emily's laughter rang out as Ryan mimicked a pompous editor's rejection letter, his voice dripping with mock disdain. "Too raw, Ms. Harper," he teased, dodging her playful swat. These moments, fleeting and unguarded, wove a thread between them, one Emily felt but dared not name. Their partnership had grown beyond the pages they edited. Over steaming containers of collards and cornbread, they traded stories. Emily's childhood, shaped by her mother's fierce hustle, Ryan's rebellion against a corporate path, choosing a scrappy press over a silver spoon. Each confession peeled back a layer, revealing hearts bruised by different battles, but beating with the same hunger for meaning. Emily found herself watching Ryan's hands as he marked a page, steady and sure, or the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, a warmth that made her chest ache. She pushed the feeling down, wary of its power, of the chasm between her world and his. At industry events, the whispers followed them like a shadow. Emily, now a literary star, felt the sting of sidelong glances, the murmurs of mismatched backgrounds, the insinuations that she'd leveraged Ryan's connections. One evening, at a glitzy gala, a silver-haired publisher leaned too close, his breath sour with wine. "Smart move cozying up to Matthews," he slurred, his smirk ablaze. Emily's jaw tightened, the echo of Richard Grayson's thrown manuscript in her mind. Before she could retort, Ryan was at her side, his voice low but sharp. "Her talent speaks for itself," he said, his gaze daring the man to push further. The publisher shrank back, and Emily's heart thudded, not from anger but from Ryan's unwavering defense. These moments piled up, each one a stone in the foundation they were building. But Emily's guard remained, forged by years of betrayal and the fear that Ryan's world, polished, privileged, might tire of hers. She'd been burned before by men who saw her as a novelty, not a partner. Ryan was different, but doubt gnawed at her, whispering that his faith in her was gratitude, not love. One humid summer evening, after a grueling day of contract negotiations, they walked along a waterfront promenade, the city's skyline a jagged silhouette against the dusk. The air buzzed with the hum of joggers and distant music, but between them, a quiet tension simmered. Ryan stopped under a street lamp, its golden light catching the faint scar above his brow, a reminder of the night she'd saved him. "Emily," he said, his voice soft but urgent, "you're not just my partner in this. I'm falling for you." The words hung in the air, a spark threatening to ignite. Emily's breath hitched, her heart racing as every fear and hope collided. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the way he stood vulnerable, waiting for her to meet him halfway. But the weight of her past, the sneers at galas, the fear of being a fleeting muse held her back. "Ryan," she said, her voice trembling, "you don't know what you're asking. Your world, mine, they're not the same. What if this is just proximity?" He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't proximity. It's you, your fire, your heart, the way you make me want to be better. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for you." Emily's throat tightened, her mother's wisdom echoing. Love is a partnership, not a pedestal. She wanted to leap, to trust the pull she felt every time he was near, but caution anchored her. "Let's take it slow," she said, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining. "I need time." Ryan nodded, a smile breaking through, soft and sure. "As long as you need," he said, squeezing her hand. They walked on, the city's pulse fading into their shared silence, a promise unspoken but felt. Emily's heart was a tangle of fear and longing, but in that moment, with Ryan's hand in hers, she glimpsed a future where love might be as fierce as her dreams. The candlelight flickered, casting a soft glow over the small table where Emily Harper and Ryan Matthews sat, the clink of silverware mingling with the low hum of conversation. The restaurant, a tucked-away gem, smelled of rosemary and roasted garlic, its intimacy a stark contrast to the whirlwind of Emily's newfound fame. Shadows and Light had become a literary comet, its glow illuminating her path, but also exposing the fault lines in her world. Tonight, though, she and Ryan were stealing a moment, their laughter weaving through stories of manuscript deadlines and quirky authors. Yet beneath Ryan's easy smile, Emily sensed a shadow, a weight he carried but hadn't named. Their plates, half-eaten with seared salmon and greens, sat forgotten as Ryan's fingers toyed with his napkin, folding and unfolding it in a nervous rhythm. Emily sipped her wine, its tartness sharp on her tongue, and tilted her head. "You've been quiet all night," she said, her voice soft but probing. "Something's up. Spill it." Ryan's eyes, usually so steady, darted away, landing on the candle's flame. He exhaled, a sound heavy with something unspoken. "There's something I haven't told you," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the restaurant's murmur. "It's about my family." Emily's stomach tightened, her mind flashing to the whispers at industry galas, the sneers about their mismatched worlds. She set her glass down, bracing herself. Okay, she said, her tone even but wary. What about them? Ryan leaned forward, his scarred brow catching the light, a reminder of the night she'd saved him. My father is Victor Matthews, he said, the name dropping like a stone into still water. The media tycoon. He owns half the publishing and TV industry, magazines, networks, you name it. The air seemed to thin, Emily's breath catching as the weight of his words settled. Victor Matthews was a colossus, a billionaire whose name was synonymous with power, his influence a shadow over every boardroom. She'd seen his face on newsstands, his steely gaze staring from Forbes covers. You're his son? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper, disbelief warring with realization. And you didn't think to mention this before? Ryan's hand stilled, the napkin crumpled in his fist. I walked away from all that 10 years ago, he said, his voice raw. I didn't want his money, his name, his control. I built Horizon Books from nothing because I wanted something real, something mine. He met her eyes, his gaze pleading for understanding. I didn't tell you because I didn't want his shadow over what we're building. Emily's mind raced, piecing together fragments of Ryan she'd glimpsed, his ease with industry insiders, his defiance of convention, the quiet intensity that drove him. But this was a chasm she hadn't seen coming. You walked away from a fortune, she said, her voice tinged with awe and unease. Why? Ryan's jaw tightened, his fingers tracing the scar above his brow. My father wanted me to be his clone. Cutthroat, calculating, living for profit. I couldn't breathe in his world. Every choice was a transaction, every relationship a deal. I left because I wanted to build something that mattered, like you're doing with Shadows and Light. His voice softened, vulnerable. I saw what you went through. Grayson, the rejections, the way they tried to break you. I didn't want you to see me as part of that world. Emily's heart twisted, caught between empathy and fear. She understood rebellion, the need to carve her path against a world that dismissed her. But Victor Matthews' shadow loomed large, and Ryan's choice to hide it felt like a crack in their trust. You should have told me, she said, her voice sharp but trembling. Not because of who he is, but because it's part of you. I know, Ryan admitted, his eyes dropping to the table. I was afraid you'd think I was just another privileged guy playing at being noble. But Emily, everything I've done with you, every pitch, every edit, every fight, it's real. You're real. The sincerity in his voice pierced her, softening the edges of her doubt. She thought of her mother's words. Love is a partnership, not a pedestal. Ryan had stood by her, fought for her story when no one else would. But this secret, this hidden legacy, was a new weight on their fragile bond. What does this mean for us? She asked, her fingers tightening around her glass. Your father's world. It's not mine. I'm still the girl who got her manuscript thrown in her face. Ryan reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, seeking permission. It doesn't change us, he said, his voice firm. I chose you, Emily. Not my father's empire. You. She let his hand cover hers, warm and steady, and for a moment, the world's noise faded. They sat in silence, the candle's flame dancing between them. Emily's mind churned. Ryan's sacrifice, his fear of losing her, the shadow of a tycoon looming over their future. But his touch grounded her, a reminder of the man who'd believed in her when she'd doubted herself. We'll figure it out, she said finally, her voice a quiet promise. But no more secrets. Ryan nodded, relief softening his features. No more secrets, he echoed. As they left the restaurant, the night air cool against their skin, Emily felt a shift, a bond tested but unbroken, a love taking root in the cracks of their truths. The hum of the crowd pulsed through the bookstore, a cacophony of anticipation as Emily Harper stood behind a signing table, her novel Shadows and Light stacked high like a monument to her resilience. The book's meteoric rise had made her a literary star, but the spotlight burned as much as it warmed. Each signature she scrawled, each smile she offered, was a defiance against the rejections that had once crushed her. Yet as she met the eyes of her readers, mostly black women, their faces alight with recognition, Emily felt the weight of new battles, the kind that came with a voice too loud to be ignored. A man in a tweed jacket approached, his expression sour amid the sea of admiration. He clutched a copy of her book, its spine uncreased, and leaned over the table, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Why don't you write something uplifting?" he demanded, his tone sharp with disdain. "All this black struggle, don't you think it's divisive?" The room hushed, heads turning, the air thick with tension. Emily's pen froze, the memory of Richard Grayson's thrown manuscript flashing like a wound. Her pulse quickened, but she straightened, her gaze locking onto his, unyielding. "Uplifting doesn't mean hiding the truth," she said, her voice steady, a blade wrapped in silk. "My story reflects lives. Mine, millions of others. If that divides, it's because some can't face what's real." The crowd erupted, applause rippling through the space, a few cheers piercing the din. The man flushed, muttered something under his breath, and retreated, his book left unsigned on the table. Emily exhaled, her hands trembling as she resumed signing, the sting of his words lingering like a bruise. She'd won the moment, but the fight against those who'd silence her truth was far from over. Days later, Emily and Ryan sat across from Victor Matthews in a midtown steakhouse, the clink of crystal and murmur of power brokers filling the air. The table gleamed with polished silver, the scent of charred meat and bourbon heavy, but the atmosphere was anything but warm. Victor, a titan whose name commanded boardrooms, leaned back in his chair, his steely eyes assessing his son and the woman who'd upended his expectations. Ryan's jaw was set, his fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the tablecloth. The scar above his brow a faint reminder of the night Emily had saved him. "I underestimated you, Ryan," Victor said, his voice gruff, a rare crack in his polished armor. "Horizon Books, this novel?" He gestured toward Emily, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "It's real. I want to invest. Name your terms." Emily's stomach twisted, the weight of Victor's presence pressing against her. She'd heard of his ruthlessness, his deals that left others in the dust. Ryan's revelation about his father had shaken her, but this offer, a lifeline for Horizon, a chance to amplify her work, came with strings she could almost see. Ryan's eyes met hers, a silent question. But before he could speak, Emily leaned forward, her voice calm but resolute. "We'd welcome your support," she said, her words measured, "but Horizon stays ours. No control, no compromises." The air stilled, Victor's brow arching, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Emily held his gaze, her heart pounding, remembering the sneers, the thrown pages, the man at the signing who'd called her work divisive. She wasn't here to bend. Victor's lips curved, not a smile but a nod of respect. "You drive a hard bargain," he said, his tone almost approving. "I like that." He turned to Ryan, his voice softening. "You've built something I didn't see coming. I'm proud." Ryan's fingers stilled, his expression unreadable, the years of estrangement hanging between them. "We'll consider it," he said, his voice tight but firm. "But Emily's right. Our vision doesn't change." The lunch ended with handshakes, Victor's grip lingering on Ryan's, a gesture heavy with unspoken reconciliation. As they left the restaurant, Emily felt the tension ebb, replaced by a quiet strength. The critic's venom, Victor's looming shadow, they were challenges, but she and Ryan were no strangers to fighting. Their bond, forged in an alley and tempered by her book's triumph, was a shield against the world's attempts to break them. Emily glanced at Ryan, his profile sharp against the city's dusk, and felt a surge of gratitude. They'd faced prejudice, secrets, and now the weight of empire. Yet here they stood, partners in every sense. The road ahead would be fraught, but for now they'd won this round. Their dreams intact, their fight unbroken. The roar of the crowd filled the vast arena, a tidal wave of voices washing over Emily Harper as she stood at the podium, her hands gripping its edges. The literary festival, a dream born from her and Ryan Matthews' shared vision, pulsed with life, its stage lined with books by authors whose stories had once been silenced. Shadows and Light had ignited a movement, and now in summer 2027, Emily was its torchbearer. Her eyes swept the audience, thousands strong, their faces a mosaic of hope, and she spoke, her voice a clarion call. "This is for every writer told their story didn't matter," she said, her words echoing. "We're here to prove them wrong." The applause thundered, a validation of her journey from a thrown manuscript to a voice that reshaped the world. Months earlier, Victor Matthews had stunned them with a gift, a substantial stake in his publishing empire, not as control but as faith. Emily and Ryan seized it, pouring the resources into Horizon Books, creating a fellowship for underrepresented authors, and launching this festival. The arena buzzed with their triumph, booths showcasing new voices, panels amplifying stories like hers. Emily's keynote traced her path: rejections, prejudice, the night she'd saved Ryan from a brick-wielding attacker, and the crowd hung on every word, their cheers a balm to old wounds. She stepped off stage, her heart full, unaware that the night held one more surprise. Ryan found her backstage, his eyes bright with a nervous energy she hadn't seen since their first coffee. He led her to the stage's center, now cleared save for a single spotlight, the crowd's murmur rising in anticipation. Books by their mentees lined the backdrop, a testament to their shared mission. Ryan took her hands, his touch warm and steady, and the world seemed to still. "Emily," he said, his voice carrying over the hush, "you're my partner, my love, my home." He knelt, a sapphire ring glinting in his hand, simple yet radiant. "Marry me. Be my partner in everything. Forever." Emily's breath caught, tears blurring her vision as the crowd gasped, then cheered. She saw their journey in his eyes, the alley, the manuscript, the galas where they'd face sneers, the quiet nights of takeout and dreams. Her fears, once a wall, crumbled under the weight of his love, fierce and unwavering. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes to everything." Ryan slid the ring onto her finger, and they kissed, the crowd's roar enveloping them, a celebration of love forged in fire. Emily clung to him, her heart soaring, knowing this moment was as much a victory as her book's success. Weeks later, their wedding unfolded in a historic brownstone, its walls steeped in stories as rich as their own. The room glowed with candlelight, the scent of jasmine and cornbread weaving through the air. Emily, in a flowing ivory dress, walked toward Ryan, his smile brighter than the summer sun. Her mother, eyes glistening, stood beside Victor, whose gruff pride softened his usual steel. Friends and family filled the space, their laughter a chorus of support through every trial. As they exchanged vows, Emily's voice trembled with truth. "You saw me when I doubted myself. I promised to love you, fight with you, build with you." Ryan's vow echoed hers, a pledge sealed with a kiss that felt like coming home. Their union was more than a marriage, it was a cornerstone of their legacy. Shadows and Light continued to inspire, its pages dog-eared by a generation reclaiming their narratives. Horizon Books, now a beacon, reshaped publishing, amplifying voices once dismissed. The festival grew, a yearly pilgrimage for dreamers, its impact rippling through communities far beyond their reach. Emily and Ryan stood at its heart, partners in love and purpose, their bond a shield against the world's lingering shadows. As they danced under string lights, Emily's head against Ryan's chest, she thought of her grandmother's words, "One small act can change a life." That night in the alley, her courage had saved Ryan, but their love had saved her, too, giving her a legacy greater than any book. They swayed, the world fading, their story a testament to what courage and love could build, a light that no darkness could extinguish. As the final notes of Emily and Ryan's journey fade, their story lingers, a testament to courage, love, and the power of a single act to change everything. What did their tale stir in you? How do acts of bravery or unexpected connections shape our lives? Share your thoughts, your stories with us, because every voice matters. Thank you for joining us in this journey through shadows and light. Your presence, your listening means the world. Come back soon for more stories that ignite the heart and soul. Until then, keep shining.